lab technician sets down a printout, reads it twice, then picks up the phone. The sample looks ordinary. A slice of whole wheat bread, the kind sitting in millions of kitchens right now. But the number next to it isn't ordinary at all. 1,500 products. 6 major grocery chains. 1 independent lab running mass spectrometry tests most consumers will never see. That's what it took to produce the report that's about to change how you look at your bread aisle. This isn't a taste test or a marketing comparison. It's a chemical residue investigation, and some of the results surprised even the people running it. Before we get into what they found, hit subscribe now, because by the end of this video, you're going to want to check what's happening with the other foods in your pantry too. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I read every one. Here's what you need to know going in. The chemical at the center of this story is glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, the world's most widely used weed killer. The World Health Organization's cancer research arm has classified it a probable human carcinogen. Bayer, which now owns it, has paid out more than $10 billion settling lawsuits tied to it. None of that proves what's in your sandwich is dangerous. But it's exactly why investigators wanted to know how much of this chemical is ending up in America's most common breakfast staple. And the answer, brand by brand, is where this gets uncomfortable. Let's start the countdown. Number 10. Market Pantry, Target's private label whole wheat bread, tested at 348 parts per billion. Number 9. Great Value, Walmart's house brand, at 340. Nearly identical contamination from 2 different retailers. Neither brand claims to be organic or glyphosate-free, so nobody broke a promise. But most shoppers assume whole wheat means healthier, and weed killer residue isn't something that shows up on an ingredient list. It's not required to. Number 8 moves somewhere unexpected. Pepperidge Farm, a brand built on the image of a New England bakery since 1937. It's 100% whole grain wheat bread tested at 587 parts per billion, almost double the store brands below it. If a premium legacy brand tests higher than the generic loaf beside it, price wasn't the variable that mattered. Sourcing was. And sourcing gets complicated fast, because the next names on this list are brands people buy specifically to avoid this chemical. Organic, non-GMO labels front and center. One of them still tested positive. If you've made it this far, hit like and share this with whoever does the grocery shopping in your house. Number 7 brings a second investigation into the story. In early 2026, Florida's Department of Health tested 8 bread products from 5 major brands, independently of the earlier national report. 6 of 8 came back positive. Sara Lee honey wheat topped the list at 191 parts per billion. Nature's Own butter bread followed at 190. Wonder Bread's classic white came in at 173. Nature's Own perfectly crafted white, marketed as non-GMO, still tested at 132. Then came the twist nobody expected. Dave's Killer Bread, certified organic, labeled non-GMO, built an entire identity around being the clean alternative. It still tested positive. White done right at just under 12 parts per billion. 21 whole grain at just under 11. Organic didn't mean 0, but those levels are roughly 16 times lower than the worst conventional loaf on this list. Organic didn't erase the chemical. It cut it down dramatically. Now the full picture. Because this is what separates an investigation from a scare story. The EPA's safety limit for glyphosate in grain is 30,000 parts per billion. Every number you just heard, even the highest, sits nowhere close to that line. Independent toxicologists and fact-checkers confirmed it. None of these breads were recalled or broke federal law. So why does this matter? Because the real question was never, is this bread illegal? It's, why is a chemical designed to kill plants showing up in food marketed as clean and safe? And that question doesn't stay contained to bread. Subscribe now. The next 4 brands include names you'd never expect, and one shows up in almost every American kitchen. Number 6. Wonder Bread's Classic White, 173 parts per billion. A brand that's been a symbol of American baking since 1921. Still not immune. Number 5. Nature's Own. 2 loaves in that same Florida round. One marketed as non-GMO. The label told shoppers to expect less. The results didn't agree. Number 4. Sara Lee Honey Wheat. Again, the highest number the Florida study recorded, at 191. Now the investigation takes a turn. A separate, earlier national study, run by the Detox Project, using a different lab and measurement scale, found something even larger. 365 by Whole Foods, tested at over 1,040 parts per billion. That's a different study and scale, worth being upfront about. But the takeaway holds across both. Private label and premium organic marketing didn't guarantee a cleaner loaf. That leads somewhere bigger. Wonder Bread and Sara Lee Honey Wheat aren't run by 2 competing companies. They're both owned by Flowers Foods. So is Nature's Own. 3 different brands, 1 parent company. It doesn't stop there. Arnold, Thomas, Entenmann's, Ballpark Buns. Different logos, same real owner. Grupo Bimbo, the largest baking company on earth, operating in the U.S. through Bimbo Bakeries USA. The illusion of choice in the bread aisle. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Next is what's actually mixed into these loaves. And it's not just glyphosate. Glyphosate came from the wheat field, months before the loaf existed. But some of what's inside commercial bread was put there deliberately, in a factory. Azode dicarbonamide, the yoga mat chemical. That nickname isn't exaggeration. ADA really is used industrially as a blowing agent in foam rubber and plastics. It's also legal in U.S. bread, used to strengthen dough at levels the FDA classifies as generally recognized as safe. The EU banned it outright. The FDA placed it under formal safety review in 2025. Some major U.S. bakers have started phasing it out voluntarily, not because they're required to, but because public pressure got there first. Then there's potassium bromate. Same job, different chemical. More than 40 countries have restricted or banned it over animal studies linking it to tumors. The FDA's position is that it fully converts to a harmless byproduct during baking. But independent lab testing has repeatedly found that conversion isn't always complete, which is exactly why the FDA opened its own review in 2024, still unresolved. None of this requires a conspiracy. It just means what's cheap and legal here is often what regulators overseas decided wasn't worth the risk. Here's a fact most shoppers never learn. When a company adds a new chemical to your bread, it doesn't need the FDA's permission first. It's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. The idea started reasonably. Ingredients safely eaten for generations, like salt, don't need review every time. But the exemptions stretch to cover brand new synthetic additives. And here's how it actually works. A company can hire its own scientists, run its own review, and decide its own ingredient is safe. It never has to tell the FDA or publish the data. The Tournerd calls it generally recognized as secret. A 2026 Environmental Working Group investigation identified more than 100 food chemicals on American shelves that no federal agency has ever reviewed. Not banned, not approved, simply never checked. In March 2025, HHS directed the FDA to begin closing this loophole. That process is still underway. So when you see a preservative you don't recognize on a label, legal doesn't mean anyone independently confirmed it was safe. It might. Or nobody's checked at all, and there's no way to tell the difference standing in the aisle. That gap runs headfirst into where the labels stop matching reality. In the US, a loaf can legally be called wheat bread without containing any whole grain. Enriched wheat flour, stripped of fiber with a few synthetic vitamins added back, still counts. Sometimes that brown color isn't whole grain either. It's caramel coloring. Nature's own perfectly crafted white carried a non-GMO label and still tested positive for glyphosate. Not a contradiction, because non-GMO Project Verified confirms one thing: no genetic modification. It says nothing about pesticide residue or farming method. USDA Organic is a stronger standard. It restricts synthetic pesticide use. But as Dave's Killer Bread showed, even organic doesn't guarantee zero glyphosate. It guarantees a different farming standard, not a chemical-free result. None of this is illegal. The problem is what shoppers assume wheat, natural, or whole grain means with 30 seconds to decide. Now, what the science actually says, because this is where most viral bread videos get it wrong in one direction or another. Multiple peer-reviewed animal studies, 2021 through 2026, tested glyphosate at doses close to what regulators consider an acceptable daily human intake. Findings were consistent. Gut bacteria linked to healthy digestion dropped off. Intestinal inflammation markers increased. One 2026 study on prenatal exposure found gut bacteria shifts in offspring previously linked to depression and metabolic disease. The honest caveat: these are mouse and rat studies, not proof that a slice of bread causes disease in humans. Nobody can ethically run that human trial. That's the real gap in the science. What we do have is regulatory disagreement. IR classified glyphosate a probable human carcinogen in 2015. The EPA and EFSA reviewed similar data and concluded it's unlikely to cause cancer at approved exposure levels. Same chemical, same research, two conclusions. This isn't settled science being hidden, it's contested science. And newer researchers keep flagging that glyphosate doesn't seem to follow the old assumption that lower doses simply mean lower risk. That's why a growing number of shoppers stopped waiting for regulators to decide. The data backs them up. In one national testing project, only 5 of 23 organic products tested positive at all, topping out around 54 parts per billion, versus 23 of 37 conventional products, climbing as high as 1,150. Non-GMO landed in between, positive nearly 70% of the time. The label matters, just not as much as most shoppers assume. That's pushed some shoppers towards sprouted grain bread, certified glyphosate residue-free, by independent labs rather than farming method alone. Brands like Silver Hills Sprouted Bakery and Food for Life's Ezekiel 4:9 line built their identity on it. But even transparency advocates admit the system is stacked against the average shopper. Errol Schweitzer, a former Whole Foods grocery executive, has pointed to grocery brands leaning on sustainability marketing without matching sourcing changes. Greenwashing is cheaper than reformulating a product. Which brings us to number 1. A brand people don't expect to distrust. 365. Whole Foods' own private label. Tested at just over 1,040 parts per billion. Higher than Wonder Bread, higher than Pepperidge Farm, higher than nearly every conventional loaf on this list. From the one store most shoppers assume already solved this problem. Every thread meets here. The labeling gap, the missing oversight. Nobody requires a private label to be tested before it hits the shelf. And the contested science. All sitting in a loaf from one of the most trusted names in American grocery. It's still below the EPA's safety threshold. Nobody broke a law. But legal and reassuring aren't the same thing. And the brand you trust most isn't automatically the one that tested cleanest. So what actually tested clean? Silver Hills Sprouted Bakery came back with no detectable glyphosate, backed by third-party certification. Food for Life and 1 Degree Organics carry the same kind of independent verification. And a surprise from inside that same Florida testing. Sara Lee's Artisano White and Pepperidge Farm's Farmhouse Hardy White both came back at 0. Proof this was never about trusting a company wholesale, but which specific product actually delivers. Dave's Killer Bread wasn't glyphosate-free, but it tested 16 times lower than the worst conventional loaf. Proof organic and non-GMO standards, even imperfect, still move the number. Here's the buying guide. Skip wheat and natural, not protected terms. Skip non-GMO alone. It tells you about genetics, not residue. Look for a USDA organic seal, a sprouted grain label, or a specific certification like biochecked or glyphosate residue-free. Those are the only claims backed by actual testing. Bread has fed civilizations for 10,000 years. It's one of the simplest foods a person can make. Flour, water, yeast, salt. What ended up in your kitchen isn't simple anymore. Not because anyone decided to poison you, but because speed, shelf life, and cost quietly won out. One decision at a time, for decades. Reading a label carefully isn't paranoia. It's the only tool a shopper has in a system that wasn't built to make this easy. You don't need to fear your bread. You just need 30 seconds and the right 3 words to look for. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and drop a comment with the brand you're switching to. I read every one, and it shapes what we investigate next.